This is Jets FM on the Our Football Network as we get ready for week one of the NFL season. Jets football. Jan Levine will join me on Sunday after the game to recap the Bills-Jets game. Should probably be about 4:30 time start, right around there. We should have it posted about half hour after that. So definitely early Sunday evening. You'll be able to check out that show. And after my interview with Ryan Talbot coming up here in just a few seconds, I will also get you ready for the season with some house cleaning between our last show and this show, which will actually be our last show before the season kicks off on Jets FM. So Ryan Talbot, who has been with us here on Jets FM for the past year or so, including our other shows on the Our Football Network, joined us to talk Bills football. And of course, Ryan, you cover football for New York Upstate. It's New York. Is it nyupstate.com? New York Upstate. You can get both, right?
You can type in New York Upstate or...
I just lost you there. What was that?
Oh, okay. You could type in New York Upstate or NY Up.
Either will work. New York, I guess NY Up, which is exactly what the logo is there. I think that's a lot easier, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, that works. All right. So we have some football to talk about. Finally, a lot of the discussions that we've had recently have been about the offseason, the draft, free agency, getting ready for the season. But here we go, Jets, Bills. And what's interesting is that these two teams have split the last 3 years with the road team winning the last 4 matchups. That's a little bit strange, but I guess that's, rivalry football at its best.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, these teams know each other really well. Same can be said for the Dolphins and the Patriots. And although the Patriots have had dominance over the Bills, they've kind of gone back and forth with Miami in years past here and there. So these are just teams that know each other really well. And even if the talent differential is significantly different, a lot of the times the games are a lot closer than people anticipate.
Well, how do you think this is going to be a big advantage for the Jets to not have to worry about coming into this environment, this crazy Bills environment, and worry about the crowd?
I think it helps them a little bit, but when you look at the two rosters itself, I see a lot of issues for the Jets going into this game, aside from not being in the stands. But yeah, I mean, if the Bills were there week one, especially, they'd be rowdy as can be, loud as can be, and they would definitely cause some problems. So it's going to be interesting to see what it's like without fans in the stands in terms of how that affects the home team play as well as the team that's on the road. But I still think there's enough working in Buffalo's favor in week one.
Okay, so Josh Allen, this is a year a lot of people are expecting that jump. Diggs is now on the team, gives him more weapons. Is there going to be that much more pressure now on Allen as well, I would assume?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be some more pressure because now, and I don't like to use the word excuses because he's never made excuses, but there's no reason for him not to perform well. You have a true number one wide receiver in Diggs. You have an outstanding number 2 receiver in John Brown. You have a great slot receiver in Cole Beasley. Add in young talent on this team like Dawson Knox at tight end, and you have a 1-2 running back punch of young players in Devin Singletary and Zach. All of a sudden, there's a lot of talent around you. Offensive line, a lot of that is the same, especially on the left side of the line. You have Deion Dawkins returning, signing a big deal there to return it or to extend his deal at left tackle. You obviously have Quentin Spain and Mitch Morse. There's some questions on the right side of the line in terms of how things are going to shake out. They released their first depth chart today, and they had Cody Ford in both at right guard and at right tackle. They have a few other guys kind of in the mix there, so they're not kind of playing their hand. For the most part, that line is intact, and then they even have some reliable guys like Tyler Kroft when healthy. He's not going to wow you, but he can be a productive player as well. So, Allen has all the weapons that you could ask for at his disposal.
Well, Brian Winters, the ex-Jet, I'm sure he'd like to get out there and bang it up with his former team. So, what's the deal there? Is Brian Winters somebody that either will potentially start week one, or more than likely he's going to get a lot of playing time for the Bills this year?
Yeah, I think Winters might be more of a depth guy, and I don't want to put too much on his play from camp, but he wasn't that impressive. And
Okay.
you have to keep in mind he's learning a new system. You have to keep in mind that he joined the team pretty suddenly, and it's been such a short off season. But he's been beaten on some one on ones. He's been beaten on some plays here and there. There was a viral video where he had his foot stepped on, but it looked like he got bowled over there too. But I don't think he's necessarily he's necessarily played well enough to kind of get the opportunity to start week one. Now, could he come in and get some snaps? Absolutely, I would anticipate that. But I don't think that he's going to necessarily start. But that said, the Bills haven't released how that right side is going to shake out. So, maybe he'll come out with that starting unit at right guard. I guess it's kind of going to be a wait and see type of scenario.
Yeah, and he's also, of course, dealing with injuries, coming off of injuries. So, a lot of reasons to understand that if he doesn't get in the lineup early, we'll keep an eye on him whether or not he eventually does get in there. But depth lineman, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, as far as the running back situation, Moss was a big draft pickup in round 3. Singletary had a huge year 1. Is this going to be pretty much Moss, Singletary, and TJ Yeldon? Do you think it's going to be Singletary number 1 and those two guys battling it out for snaps? How do you think the running back rotation is going to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Singletary will get the number one responsibility early on this season, just because he has more experience in the system. Tied for the league lead in yards per carry. Now, mind you, he didn't have the type of workload that Derrick Henry, who he tied with, had. So it's a limited workload. It's a limited amount of carries, but he did prove to be pretty good at breaking tackles and making people miss. So I think you kind of give him the majority of the workload, unless he starts having some issues with fumbles, which there was a few instances of that at training camp. He had a few games last year where he had a fumble or two, and it kind of you could see the coaching staff kind of went away from him a little bit in those games, whether it was going to Frank Gore. So, I will say that the door is open for Zach Moss to get a bigger role sooner rather than later, probably sooner than I anticipated, because with this shortened offseason, I thought all rookies would be brought along slowly. But to their credit, a few of Buffalo's rookies have really stood out at camp, and they look like they could make a bigger impact than anticipated. So I think Singletary, though, starts week 1 as the main carrier, but I still think Moss ends up pretty close in carries when all is said and done at the end.
Okay, now as far as this matchup, Josh Allen definitely scares Jet fans, or at least he scares me with his mobility, and that's what makes him a special quarterback. That's what makes him dangerous. What have you seen in the matchups? Well, the number 1 matchup last year was very interesting because the Jets defense really played well, and then CJ Mosley goes down, and I'm sure there was a little bit of a coincidence, but also maybe not, that as soon as Mosley went down, it was like the floodgates opened and the Bills were able to move the ball at will. Not sure that that would have happened if Mosley would have been there. Maybe it would have, but it just coincided with Mosley's injury. So what you've seen from remember that game, and even though Allen didn't really play in the second game, what did you see that you think the Bills have got to do a better job of against this Jet defense led by Greg Williams?
Well, in terms of what I saw in that first game, yeah, I want to say the Bills started that game with some ridiculous amount of passes in a row without rushing the ball. And to their credit, they were actually moving the ball down the field against the Jets. And then Allen threw one that was just like low and outside of Beasley. Still should have been caught, but it deflected up, and Mosley ended up running that in for a touchdown. He did have some success moving the ball early in that game, but you're right. At one point, the Jets were really shutting them down, and once Mosley left the field, then he was able to have a lot of success getting the Bills back into that game, and then ultimately winning the game when all was said and done. In terms of what he has to get better at, the Williams is he's going to send a lot of looks, a lot of pressures, some blitzes probably at Josh Allen to see what he's done in terms of recognition at the line from year 2 to year 3. because Allen struggled with that at times last year. You saw it in some game, sometimes against the Jets in that week 1 matchup, but especially in games against like the Ravens, where they threw a lot of pressure at him and he really did not respond well to that. So he has to show that he can handle the pressure, that he can see this pressure coming, that he can either get rid of the ball or and go, make the Jets have to play back a little bit, which obviously he can do with his arm and his legs if he connects early. But that's going to be the one big test for him. I will say last year he really improved in that intermediate game. He obviously is still a threat to move with his feet, but this offseason and in training camp, he was connecting pretty well on deep balls with a lot of his receivers. So if he can get that deep ball going and hit a deep ball early against the Jets again, that might change what Greg in terms of those looks and those blitzes that he might be sending, because if he can hit one early and then you're going to, send a cornerback blitz or whatever, a safety blitz, well, then Allen might go back to the well again and throw another deep ball. So it's going to be interesting. But without Mosley, obviously Jamal Adams traded as well. Yep. Those are two huge pieces from that defense 1 year ago. I really like the possibilities of what Buffalo's offense could do on Sunday.
And what was the strength of the Jets last year was their run defense. And the big question mark again this year is going to be the secondary. And there was a bunch of injuries back there, and guys, and Adams is gone, and Desir really hasn't played, and yet he's supposed to start. Les Austin might actually get to start, it looks like. And that's a big step up for him, even though he showed promise in his first year last year with the team as a late round draft pick, even though he has talent. The injuries are the reason he slid all the way down in the draft. But I got to think that that's what the Bills will probably try to do early on. And they have a few rookie receivers of their own. They've got Diggs. So you do get the feeling that since the Jets' strength is their run defense on that side of the ball, that if the Bills can expose the Jets in the secondary early, it could be a long day for the Jets defense.
Yeah, without a doubt. I would like to think that they're not going to come right out and throw the ball so many times in a row like they did 1 year ago in week 1. Try to get the run game going a little bit with Singletary. If you get short yardage situation, maybe roll Moss out there early to kind of bring out, your guy that you think can pick up that 1 or 2 yards versus defense and see who wins that battle. But yeah, I would like to think that the Bills are going to try to pass on this defense when you have guys like Diggs and you have guys like Brown and Beasley and Knox. You would like to think that there's going to be some mismatches to be had and that could benefit Buffalo.
As far as the new receivers for Buffalo is, besides Diggs, some of the young receivers, any chance that we're going to see any of them make an impact early in the season?
That's it's kind of hard to tell. You never know. There's a lot of young talent, though, on this team. One player that's really actually stood out is Gabriel Davis, the wide receiver. He's another guy that maybe could really kind of step up and maybe, I don't know how many snaps he's going to get per se, but when your attention is going to be on Diggs and Brown and Beasley, he's going to be out there against who knows on the Jets secondary, and he's been really impressive. He's really done well against cornerbacks, Trey White, Levi Wallace, when Josh Norman's been out there. So I could really see even a guy like Gabriel Davis making an early impact for this team. Zach Moss at the goal line, I've mentioned him before. So there's just so much talent on this roster that I would like to think that the Bills, and I'm not trying to disrespect the Jets here, but I would like to think that the Bills, if they are a legitimate AFC contender, which I think they are, that they would roll over the Jets in week 1.
And quickly, before I ask you a couple questions on defense. So the offensive line, the biggest question would be the right side of the line.
You cut out.
The biggest question would be the right side of the offensive line.
Yeah, because Cody Ford obviously started last year at right tackle, but they're not sure if they're going to put him at right guard or right tackle, according to that official depth chart. John Feliciano, the starting right guard from last year, is out with a torn pec right now. So hypothetically, let's say they move Ford inside to guard. Well, then you're talking Ty Nsekhe and Darrell Williams at tackle. He's spelling one of the at guard as well. He has that versatility. Inseki was actually very good last year when he was out there at tackle, but he's up there in age. He was banged up a lot last year. It didn't take long for him to kind of get those the bruises and the little bumps and bruises along the way. So I'm not sure what the right answer is for this team in terms of their offensive line. I will say that Darrell Williams had a great camp, so it wouldn't shock me if he was starting at guard or right tackle on Sunday. So it's just going to be interesting because that side where I'm sure the Jets are going to probably try to send some pressure to test that unit out, because even if it's Ford at tackle where he played 1 year ago, it's going to be someone different at guard.
Sure.
So who knows how that communication is going to be.
And the Jets have a bunch of injuries at wide receiver, and the Bills have a strength at secondary. They're going to be able to put Josh Norman against, say, a number 2. Is that how the Bills will work their secondary, or do they keep their corners on certain sides of the field?
Well, I will say today's injury report, Norman did not practice, so it's possible he might miss this game due to a hamstring injury.
Okay.
Levi Wallace, though, practiced in full. So, I think that there might be certain games where the Bills might try to move White around, but for the most part, they keep him on one side of the field. And I think against the Jets, you're not going to have him moving to cover one of these receivers. I think you're just going to trust the rest of that secondary, whether it's Levi Wallace or Norman out there, whether it's Taron Johnson in the slot, and then you have of Hyde and Poyer. Big nickel, it might be Saran Neal. They just have a lot of depth there where I think they're going to trust that defense because, there's not a lot of blown plays or in that secondary. I can think of like one last year in that Ravens game. So it doesn't happen often. The communication level's high there. And, again, I don't want to come across as disrespecting the Jets, but Denzel Mims says he's going to probably be able to play, but he's missed so much time. I don't know if he'd be a huge factor,
No.
But to Trey White's credit, he said he was watching film of Mims at Baylor to try to get a read on him. Brashad Perriman, I don't know what his status is, but I know that every time that he would kind of get out there, his knee would start swelling up again. That's worrisome. And then you see that first unofficial depth chart, mind you, but you have Chris Hogan starting, and the guy was just signed, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah. And he's going to get a lot of opportunities out there as a veteran. And I think the one position to keep an eye on will be Taron Johnson in the slot. The Jets right now, if you look at it, because of what they would want their explosive guys to be like, especially Perryman. I agree. I don't even know if they're going to take a chance with him out there. And Mims, I don't even think he's going to play, to tell you the truth. If he does, he ain't going to be a factor. But Crowder and Herndon are the guys I think the Jets are going to have to rely on. And that Crowder-Taron Johnson matchup could be very significant. And whoever covers Chris Herndon, because I think Chris Herndon, if he's healthy, so far he's been healthy. He had a tremendous rookie season, and the Jets are going to be counting on him a lot this year.
Yeah, Crowder did a lot of damage in terms of receptions in that earlier game against Buffalo last year. He was definitely a favorite target. He was getting open a lot. I could definitely see them utilizing him as much as possible. Herndon, I think, is a star if he can stay healthy. I think he's a great young tight end. I think he can really help this Jets offense this year. He could end up being, if we're talking fantasy football, he could be a star in fantasy football this year, because I think he's going to see a lot of targets. I can see the Jets playing from behind a lot this year. So Herndon, I love Herndon. He could give the Bills some fits. It's going to definitely come down to how they match up against Herndon. And, Crowder is, as long as they can keep him behind the first down marker, you can feed him the ball 3-4 yards down the field, 5 yards down the field. But if it's 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, you got to tackle him when he catches the ball right away. So it's going to be interesting, because I feel like he had a ridiculous, something like 14 catches last year in game 1, but the yardage wasn't that crazy. No. So it came out average just because of where they were getting him the ball and the fact that the Bills were there to tackle him pretty much immediately after the play.
All right, a couple quick things before I let you go. Sticking on defense, and really just the new players to keep an eye on. 5 former Panther players that McDermott was associated with coming on board, including Mario Addison. So, he was the big 3-year, $30 million player, 9.5 sacks last year. He's up there in age, but the Bills are trying to make an impact this year, win a division and so forth. And that's why Addison is going to be very important. We talked about Josh Norman, of course, and you got others like AJ Klein and so forth. So, but Mario Addison, do you think he's going to be the one that is going to have the biggest impact?
Yeah, of the former Panthers, I definitely think so. On Buffalo's first unofficial depth chart, they actually have him on the second team behind Jerry Hughes, and I don't think that means that he's fallen off at all. It's just the problem for the Buffalo is Addison's production came on the same size currently, and I'm sure that they'll flip flop those guys around a little bit and make them play on the other side here and there. But I still think Addison is a guy that can get you 9 sacks or more. He's had 9 sacks or more 4 of the last 4 years. So he's definitely a guy that still gets a lot of quarterback pressures, can still get out there. I really think that when it comes to Buffalo's defense, as good as Buffalo's secondary and their linebackers are, I really think that the defensive line is going to feast on this Jets offensive line. Now, New York, they went out, they added a lot. I think that there's some promise there, but they're rolling out 5 new starters in week 1 in one of the shortest off seasons that you can imagine. So it takes time for these guys to gel. I'd be shocked if after Sunday's game we were talking about how outstanding the Jets offensive line looked, just because it takes so much time for you to get the communication. You're going to have, I'm sure the Bills will send some blitzes themselves, whether it's Tremaine Edmonds coming from the linebacker position, which they did a few times, whether it's a cornerback or a safety blitz time to time. They're going to test that offensive line, and I really like the front, though, that Buffalo has. Obviously, we talked about Addison and Hughes. Trent Murphy, they kept around despite being able to save almost $8 million if they would have cut him. He had a really strong camp. On the inside, they're pretty stout as well. Ed Oliver had a really strong second half to his season last year. Star Lotulelei opted out, but you still have Vernon Butler, another former Panther, in there. Harrison Phillips, who looks like he's back from his torn ACL. And Phillips, 3 games, was starting to get more snaps than Lotulelei before he suffered that ACL injury. So if he is truly back, Lotulelei's loss may not be as significant as some people tend to believe.
And then finally, if this game is close, the Bills will have a rookie kicker. So that could come into play. Interesting that without fans in the stands, maybe the young kickers won't feel as much pressure. It's possible. They're still going to feel pressure, don't get me wrong, but they may not feel as much pressure without fans in the stands. But still, if Tyler Bass gets an opportunity to make a big kick early in his career on Sunday, we'll see how that goes, because Stephen Hauschka is gone.
Yeah, and to Bass's credit, he beat Hauschka outright. It wasn't a let's give it to the young kid just because. There was a day where Bass didn't kick well. I think he made 6 out of 8, and then the next day Hauschka made all 8. They went in order. It was Bass that made all of his kicks. It was Hauschka that missed a few from the I think it was high 40s, low 50s, and that was Hauschka's biggest flaw. He can't connect consistently anymore on those longer kicks, which used to be one of his greatest strengths. And then the Bills also said one of the biggest factors that led them to choosing Bass was they held this scrimmage and the winds were really swirling that day. And, Buffalo wins when they're going in November, December, it's even worse.
Yep.
And they said that Bass was able to kick through those winds and send one ball out of the end and another one really deep force a touchback. So even on kickoffs, it's going to benefit them. In terms of the nerves, what I would love to see happen is maybe around halftime, the Bills get the ball just over the 50-yard line and time is running down, and they decide, hey, let's let this young kid come in and kick a really far ball, because if you miss it, well, it was high 50s, low 60, in terms of yards. And if you miss it, no big deal. If you get it, boy, what a confidence boost that would be for this young kid. Whatever the case may be, you just don't want to see him get up, because then all of a sudden kickers, especially young kickers, it can get into their heads a little bit. So Bass won the job outright. I'm hoping he can come in and contribute immediately to this team and prove why he deserved to win. But he's saying and doing all the right things. He says, I have a big leg, but for me to stick around in this league, I have to be consistent from 35 to 49 yards. And he's right. If you can be a kicker that makes those kicks consistently, you're going to have a job in this league for a long time.
Weather. Last question. How's it supposed to be on Sunday?
Yeah, I haven't even looked into that. I know where I'm from, which is about an hour away, it's supposed to rain on Sunday.
Oh.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's going to be the case in Buffalo. Okay, it does say 74 with a chance of rain on... Actually, let me look again. Let me check that. That was the wrong one. Scattered thunderstorms possibly on Sunday. So, some weather could factor in there. Wet footballs can lead to turnovers, as you know. So, maybe that'll add another interesting wrinkle to this game.
Yeah, and keep those thunderstorms away. We don't want any half-hour lightning delays. So that's even though the fans aren't going to be there, it's aggravating watching your sporting event take a 30-minute break because of lightning in the area. Yeah, I don't remember the last time with all these sporting events all over the country even in years, I don't remember anybody ever getting hit by lightning, but I'm sure it's happened somewhere. All right. So Ryan.
Oh, without
it. Yeah, right. Ryan, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll talk to you again here when the Jets are hosting the Bills later on this season. We have our New England show, so we'll get you on there. And of course, we'll also talk to you on our regular show on OFN today. So Ryan, I do appreciate it. Again, nyup.com for the latest Buffalo Bills news. And they can also check you as far as your Twitter handle. It's Ryan Talbot Bills.
Correct.
Ryan, appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. All right. That's Ryan Talbot of covering the Buffalo Bills. He's done a great job here on this network, filling in for us and letting us know what's going on with the Buffalo Bills over the last year and a half or so. We're going to wrap up the show here over the next 5 or 10 minutes, talking about the New York Jets and what we can give you as far as the latest regarding what is happening, latest injuries. Look, that's the one thing as far as the Jets are concerned with their injuries that I really don't want to have to get into because, to tell you the truth, we really don't have any information on injuries for the New York Jets. So I'm going to just stay away from that. It's useless to talk about injuries unless you know for sure that there's a player that's out. So I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to speculate. I haven't heard anything. As Ryan said, Perryman, that doesn't look good. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to make of it because if Perryman doesn't play, it's just not a real good sign for the Jets. They might be put in a position where, as Ryan said, you got Crowder, you got Hogan, and maybe Denzel Mims is forced to actually play some just because of the fact of bodies. Because normally Vincent Smith would get in there and play. But now you're in a situation where who else are you going to play? You're going to play Braxton Berrios a little? It's not a real good situation to be in. But, hey, we'll keep our fingers crossed that Brashad Perryman gets in there and plays. I will say this regarding Perryman. There are quite a bit of Jet fans. Jan Levine's one of them. I know others that really, one of the things that they weren't happy about this offseason was not bringing Robbie Anderson back. And I have been very critical of Robbie Anderson until last year, as you know. I thought towards the end of last year, mid-season to the end of the season, was Robbie Anderson's best football. He proved that he could actually catch the ball over the middle, make the big catch, take the big hit, hold on to the ball, sort of like he was making plays in a number one receiver's role. That's what you expect from a number one receiver. Now, Robbie Anderson just doesn't have the athletic ability, though, to ever be a number one. Unless, of course, you're talking about a team that is an explosive defense, great running game, a superior quarterback, and the receiver situation is the least of their issues. That's different. But normally, Robbie Anderson is not going to be a number one receiver. But he did look like he could be in that role at least for a bit last year, and it worked out, and you felt, hey, if he comes back, that's okay. And that's what we talked about last year. Now, whether or not you wanted, hey, they could have just paid him an extra $1 million or $2 million. Look, the Jets have all this extra money in their salary cap, so why didn't they just pay Robbie Anderson? I don't know what went on there. I think if Robbie Anderson really wanted to play for the Jets, he'd be playing for the Jets. That's my opinion. And I also do believe that if Joe Douglas really wanted Robbie Anderson here, then he'd be here too. So I just think Robbie Anderson's in Carolina because it's one of those things where when it came down to it, the Jets really didn't desire him as much. And Robbie Anderson didn't feel like, hey, you know what? For a little bit of money, I want to stay here. And if he really wanted to stay here that bad, felt this was the best place for his career, you're not going to screw around for an extra $1 million, $1.5 million because of that. I don't believe that. And I don't blame Robbie Anderson for leaving. So it's not who's right, who's wrong. It's that I just think this is the way it is. And Jets didn't want him. Robbie Anderson really didn't want to be here, didn't want to take a pay cut for it, and we move on. Now, here's the difference. I think a lot of Jet fans that are upset at Robbie Anderson leaving, and I think that's because they don't believe, Sam Darnold has got to have a tough enough time with the receivers this year that he needed to have some, familiarity with those receivers. It would have been easier for Sam Darnold. He knows Robbie Anderson, blah, 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 blah. I get it. All right, I truly do. But Rashad Perryman is better than Robbie Anderson. He just is. Now, will Perryman stay healthy this year? And the Jets then can sign Perryman to a longer extension after this year? Who knows? Nobody knows. That's the mystery. That's the guess. That's the guesswork every GM has to play. But there's no way Joe Douglas wasn't looking and talking to Perryman as he was in negotiation with Robbie Anderson, saying to himself, well, if we can't sign Anderson and we want to sign him, then here's our backup plan. There's no way do I believe that. What I believe has happened is Joe Douglas felt if I can get Robbie Anderson with this figure, this is where I think he's worth, then great, I got him. And maybe even they go ahead and sign it, Perryman too. Who knows? But if they don't, if it's one or the other, oh, okay, Robbie, you don't want to fit where we think you should fit. Here's a guy that I think is worth what we're going to pay him. I think he is just as good and maybe even better. And as good as Robbie Anderson has been for this Jet team over the last few years, and he's been good. He hasn't been great. He's been good. Robbie Anderson was a free agent. He was a gift. Anytime you can get a player that develops like Robbie Anderson, you don't have to spend a draft pick on him. It's a gift. But Perryman has first round talent for a reason. He's bigger. He's fast. He's the complete package. The problem early on, combination of injuries, inconsistency. There was a lot of pressure as a first round pick with the winning organization. Didn't work out for Perryman. It's worked out in his last 2 stops. Now he has to prove that he can do it in the beginning of the season, looked at as the man. Because even though Crowder still might wind up with more catches, Perryman has got to be the man. He has to be the guy. I'll tell you right now, if a good season for Perryman where I believe that he is going to prove that he's better, is a better option of Robbie Anderson, minimum 8 touchdowns. Minimum. And he may even have to do more than that because I think he can. I think if Perryman is healthy for 14, 15 games this season, I expect Perryman to tally between 8 and 10 touchdowns and over 1,000 yards. If he doesn't, Didn't work out. And I don't even think they should worry about a new contract. If you want to give him something pretty cheap, fine. If he's expecting a little bit more than that, he can go find the cash somewhere else. But for Perryman to finally live up to the talent that he had when he came out a few years ago, that's what I'm expecting. And I do. I think Perryman is going to be a big part of this offense if the Jets are going to have success this year. And look, if he has an inconsistent year, if he misses 4 or 5 games, or if he has the type of so-so stats that Robbie Anderson has given us, because Robbie Anderson's stats were never all that great. If he does that, then Jets aren't going to win any more games this year than they won last year. In order for them to be better, they have to actually have players that are better than last year. So Perryman has to be an upgrade of Robbie Anderson. We know Chris Herndon will be an upgrade because even though Griffin gave the Jets some good production at tight end out of nowhere last year, Herndon is clearly better. And to have Griffin as a number 2 and Herndon to continue to show that he's got the ability to be one of the better tight ends this franchise has ever had, that is huge. That's the other upgrade we're talking about. And then you look at running back. And if you take a look at some of the things that were talked about, let me see here. Where is it? I've got it. Some of the things that were talked about in the Post. Mark Cannizzaro, one of the recurring themes around the Jets that's become tiring. And I find that interesting because the recurring themes that have become tiring is the tiring of the writers talking about it. I always get a kick out of that stuff. So the writers who want to make such a big deal out of this Le'Veon Bell-Adam Gase relationship, and we have never heard Adam Gase say anything negative about Bell, like really negative, slam him, any of that. We've never heard Le'Veon Bell slam Adam Gase in any way, shape, or form. You want to say what happened last week with the miscommunication? Okay, fine. If there was miscommunication, they got together, they talked. That's what they said. They both talked. They got that out of their system. They understand each other a little bit now. We move on next. But the writers, especially in New York, and this is why it's tough to play in New York. You have to have thick skin. They make these stories out of nowhere. And this was one of those stories. So he talks about this is a tiring, recurring theme. And it began when Gase was not on board with management paying Bell the money he did. Or the rumblings that Gase was not on board. Okay. Where did the rumblings come from? Writers. Are they facts? No. Do we know for sure? No. But they just decided that they wanted to come up with some, Gase doesn't really want Le'Veon Bell here for the amount of money. And is it something that could have been true? Sure. Of course it could have been true. Absolutely. But have we ever heard from Adam Gase or seen anything in his game planning or in anything the way he's treated Le'Veon Bell that he doesn't want him here? I haven't seen any of it. So I'm not. It's not. Give me a breadcrumb at least of one incident, like something on the sidelines where they go head to head. Give me something where I can go, yeah, maybe these guys don't like each other. But all we did was hear stories out of nowhere from nobody. Nobody ever came out and said something. Sources, this is what I'm hearing. So that began with nothing concrete. So then we get to, well, Gase sometimes misused Le'Veon Bell last year. Look, I said this many times. What happened last year with this Jet offense, you can't have that. And what I mean by that is, and you're not going to have that. You got the mono, you have the injuries, especially the offensive line was terrible. There were so many factors. It was the first year with the new system. There's just so many factors that point to, well, at least the team won 6 out of the last 8 games. And they had a couple of games where they scored, 2 or 3 straight games where they scored in the 30s. That, everybody wants to harp on, oh, the Jets offense was so bad last year, but they never talk about why it was so bad last year. Okay, because early on that season with no quarterbacks and all the injuries, they didn't do anything. That stretch, those first 6 games against that tough competition, completely destroyed their statistics offensively for the entire season. It didn't matter that later in the year their offense started to play that much better. It just didn't matter. They dug themselves such a hole that's why whatever happened last year with Le'Veon Bell, I don't buy it, especially since Le'Veon Bell was coming off a year off of football. That's also why I said last week, there's no more excuses with that. No more excuses with Gase with that. There's no more excuses with Darnold with that. And there's no excuses with Bell with that, especially with his contract. It's nice to see Bell. It looks like in much better shape, especially when you look at him. No, I don't know when Brian Costello with the Post, he comes out and he says, Le'Veon Bell's ugly training camp has Gase headed right for disaster. I don't know why Le'Veon Bell having a bad season means Adam Gase can't win football games. You have depth at receiver now. I mean, at running back. Gore can give you something decent. Pirine, if he's healthy, I think is going to be better than advertised or better than people would have expected. So I don't think Le'Veon Bell having a bad season means that Adam Gase is in trouble. I just don't. I don't think it's tied together. Sam Darnold is tied to the hip with Gase, not Le'Veon Bell. But he talks about this all sets up as a disaster for Gase, and et cetera, about Bell being the centerpiece of the Jets offense. And I don't know. I can see this is a key reason, of course, why people thought Gase didn't want Bell here, because that's not what Gase and a lot of other coaches kind of feel that way too. That I don't need that workhorse back. I don't need to have, maybe if you have a Derrick Henry, that's one thing. But see, that's the thing with Le'Veon Bell. If Le'Veon Bell can show that he's still the player he was, and he's still young enough, he still has enough tire wear because of the fact that he had the year off, there shouldn't be any bad tire wear. So I expect Bell to be in good enough shape. And if he's not, if Le'Veon Bell, for whatever reason, because I don't care about what anybody sees in training camp, let's see what happens week 1. And as Ryan said, it's going to be tough, though. I mean, he's exactly right. That defense going up against the new offensive line, which I do think is going to be much better. Still, it's asking a lot for the Jets. It's going to be tough. I don't expect the Jets, with the injuries at receiver, with the new offensive line, to march up and down the field against the Bills. It's just not going to happen. So they definitely need Le'Veon Bell in that running game to give Darnold an opportunity to breathe, because if they can't run the football and the Bills just attack Sam Darnold, especially if Brashad Perryman doesn't play, then it's going to be a long day for the Jets. But I want to see week 1. Can we give me at least week 1? And let me see what's going on with Le'Veon Bell. And you know what? I don't expect much, but I just still want to see. And even though I don't expect much, and I see, that's me, but I could tell what we're already going to see. If the Jets aren't able to run the ball week 1, then these stories are going to be that's going to be the biggest story, is Le'Veon Bell. And I'm also, and I said this last week with the Sam Darnold stuff, do we have to really keep hearing about all this glorified Sam Darnold news coverage? We haven't even gotten to week 1 yet. It's almost like they're doing it on purpose. So if he doesn't have a good game, and I don't think he's going to have a good game. I don't think Tom Brady would have a good game with this offensive line in their first game together, and the receiver situation. I wouldn't expect Tom Brady to have a good game. And he's looked really bad in Buffalo. Remember that game when they won the year they won the Super Bowl, and New England went to Buffalo and got shut out or something? You can do that the first week of the season. So, but hey, it's New York. If the Jets don't play well, they're going to go crazy. It's going to be over-exaggerated. But I do have faith. I do think this is going to be a closer game than Ryan Talbot believes. We talked about the rivalry. The road teams won 4 straight. Jets don't have to worry about the crowd. Get this. Adam Gase is 2-2 straight up, 4-0 against the spread in road openers. That's good news for the Jets. They're coming off confidence-wise, the way they played at the end of the season last season. And overall, because the Bills are also, just like every other team, dealing with mystery, Diggs and Allen, this is their first game. I think this has got a chance with the rivalry to be a lot closer than generally people think. And let's hope it does come down to a field goal and a rookie kicker out there. Because remember what happened to us last year at our kicking situation. It was part of the reason we lost. So anyway, we'll talk about the game on Sunday. Give us about a half hour, 15 minutes after every game. Well, since we're not live, give us about an hour and a half after every game. So probably by halftime of the 4:00 game, that's a good time. Hey, halftime of the 4:00 game, let me check and see, and you'll more than likely you'll get the show available, the Jets post-game shows for the 1:00 games. But Jan will be with me. Again, probably will be posted right around halftime of the 4:00 games. We'll talk at some time next week too. We'll have 2 shows a week. I'll be doing my thing during the week. Jan will be with me on post games. I'll have interviews when it matters, when there are some key analysts that we can get on. And next week, San Francisco after that. So let's hope the Jets might be able to steal one of Buffalo and give us something good to talk about next week. For Ryan Talbot, I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to Jets FM on EOFN. We'll see you next time.